Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video. In this video we're gonna go ahead and get the leaf springs all replaced because I finally got them in. We're gonna drill out these brackets and re-weld the brackets back in place. Get these old brackets all out because they're all rusted here. There's got a rust hole on this side, rust. This thing's all rusted out. That won't be too hard to replace. So I'm gonna replace both of those, and then we're gonna replace the entire leaf springs. The front two brackets are still good. They're still in good shape. Nothing's rusted through, it's just surface rust. So we already sanded the entire frame down. We just have to run like on the underneath of the frame. We kind of missed a few spots underneath, so we're gonna get the entire underside finished sanded, and then we're gonna go ahead and replace these leaf springs. Then we're gonna go ahead and paint the entire thing. The leaf springs are fine, they won't be painted because they're brand new and they're already black. So we'll get the frame rails painted, just all the rails in here painted, and then we're gonna get the rear axle painted, and also the drive shaft. We're gonna get that all painted in, and I'm gonna try to go ahead and get all the wheel off and paint the drums too, so that way they're nice and black too, so that way they're not all rusted out. And that's pretty much it for this entire piece here. It's just a little more sanding, drilling out these rear leaf springs, and I have these new brackets, the brackets that hold in the leaf springs, the new leaf springs, and the bracket that connects to the truck. So I got all of that new, and then I have new U-bolts and the new bolts that bolt to the U-bolts or the nuts, and the plate as well. I got all of that new. All the brake lines, the wiring, all that stuff's still good, so we're gonna keep that here. None of that needs to be replaced. So we'll go ahead, I'll finish sanding this, and then we'll start drilling these brackets out. Alrighty guys, so we got these few nuts off. The U-bolts don't want to come out. These nuts are so stuck on there, they're not going to be coming out. So I have new ones anyway. I have new U-bolts and new nuts and the new plate. So I'm just going to cut those off and get those taken out super quick. I don't feel like messing with it anymore because I have new ones anyway. There's no point messing with it. Then this is going to come out. All this stuff's going to come out anyway. It's all ready to go. I already got all these bolts off. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut those U-bolts off and then pull this entire leaf spring off and then start drilling out this bracket here, so that way we can go ahead and put the new leaf spring and the new bracket on. So let's go ahead and start cutting. Alrighty guys, so we just pulled this piece off. The axle shifted back a little bit, but good thing we got new shock absorbers. Those are kind of holding it in place right now. And now I just have to hit this bolt through, and this thing will come right out. And just like that, we got this old one off. It's not too hard to take it off. It's just so rusted. The bolts are a little bit more stuck than they would usually be. And now I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this plate. And before I put it on, I'm gonna paint that plate so that way it's not all messed up and doesn't get rusted again. And we're gonna go ahead and drill that piece out and then we're gonna go ahead and finish sanding our little bits and pieces here, so that way whenever we put our leaf spring on, it won't rust again, and it'll last for however many more years. And let's go ahead and start drilling this piece out, because that's our most important part. We're gonna go ahead and drill that out and weld in our new piece. Alrighty guys, so I just got this piece all knocked out. It's not too bad, it's just, I don't know exactly how they use it. It's almost, it's not exactly a spot weld. It's more like it's like a square piece of metal where they crimp it together. I forgot the exact word for it, but it's like where they crimp it together so tight, it smushes it together and it holds it pretty much like a spot weld, but I feel like it's a bit stronger the way they compress it with so much pressure. They pop it. It's like a rivet. That's the word. It's like a rivet where it pops in and it's ready to go. I don't have rivets that big or a press that big, so I'll either weld it in or I'll get a bolt on the back, weld a nut to the back, screw it up, and then just weld everything shut so that way it's super tight and it's not going to move anywhere. But it's cleaned up pretty nice. We got a big old pile of trash around the floor, but that won't be hard to clean up. But as you can tell here, all the four are out. It had like rust buildup, so it almost looked like it was welded, but once I got the hammer back behind there, all I did was just knock it at an angle and just yank off on it, and it pulled right out, so I'm happy with that. Came out pretty easily. Next step is just put the new bracket on, and that'll be pretty much it for, well, that won't be all for this side. I'm gonna finish sanding this piece right here, and before I put everything on, I might throw some, or I will throw some weld through primer on here, so that way it doesn't get all rusted again. The plate where the U-bolts sit, I'm gonna sand all this stuff down too. I'm gonna get this all looking nice, and then on the inside of that bracket as well, I'm gonna make that all looking nice on the inside of that, or underneath, not the inside, the underside where it bolts through. So that'll be pretty much it for this side here. Next is we're probably gonna do one side at a time, so that way it's easier, and that way I don't mess anything up, so I know where everything lines back up, and then I can align it with that side. So we won't mess with that side yet, but we will get to that side in the video. That side we'll probably just fast forward through everything, because you guys have already kind of seen how this one comes apart. But we're gonna go ahead, sand this piece down, throw some weld through primer on it, get that piece all welded nice and good, all welded in. Sand that piece off, throw some paint on it, because that doesn't need welded, it just needs bolted. We'll bolt the new leaf springs in, and then we're gonna go ahead and fix all that, and then this whole frame is gonna get painted, and also the axle and the drive shaft is all gonna get painted in this video, so stay tuned for that. Keep watching, and just keep watching along with us. I'm glad you guys are watching. There's probably not too many people right now watching, but for whoever is, thank you guys for following along. If you guys could keep sharing these videos, it helps us out a lot. So let's get back to work, and we'll get this piece weld it in. But as of tonight, that's probably it for tonight. It's getting dark out, so that'll be it for tonight. We'll just clean up. We'll clean up everything off camera because nobody cares about that stuff. So we'll clean up all that, and we'll get all this junk taken care of. And then tomorrow afternoon sometime, or whenever we can get back on the truck, tomorrow we'll start getting that piece all ready to fit in. And I'll probably just bolt it in just for now, just kind of mock everything up, and then from there get it all nicely welded in. For this, I'll probably just weld it myself with our little welder we have here at the house. But for anything bigger that's like, that welder is still good. It just doesn't weld sheet metal because it needs thinner wire, plus it's a flux, so it's not the greatest for sheet metal. For thicker metal like this, it won't matter too much, so I'm still gonna weld it as good as possible. I'm not gonna leave like halfway unwelded, but we'll get all this stuff welded up nice and good, and then we'll go ahead and keep working. But as of tonight, that'll be it. Alright, you guys, welcome back. It's another day, or it is the next day here, so we're gonna go ahead and finish up on this side. I already started drilling these pieces out, so I got all those drilled out. We had our bolts a little too big for these sized holes, so we started drilling these out. And then I got these 3 on the bracket drilled out, and I just have to drill 1 more, and then we're good with this side. We're just gonna go ahead and do all this, grind it down, put some not weld through primer since I'm bolting it, but, or yeah, we'll end up welding the bolts shut, so that way they stay shut, because I can't find any of those big rivets. So I'm just gonna end up welding the bolts shut. So we're gonna throw some weld through primer on the back of this, behind here, and then on the back of this bracket here, so that way when it sits up against the metal, it won't rust and it'll be perfectly fine. These right here, they're already they're already painted, so there's no point of painting these. But as for the rest of the frame, we're gonna go ahead, finish sanding on the inside, like on the inside here of this bracket, so we can get all that rust and junk out of there. And we're gonna sand back where the old bracket was. And we're gonna go ahead and clean up this whole side of the frame, get the leaf spring set up, and then we're gonna go ahead and move to that side, and then this whole area, this whole frame, the whole rear end of the frame is gonna be ready for paint. So let's go ahead and get this piece put in. Alrighty guys, so I just ran and grabbed a can of weld through primer from O'Reilly's. This stuff's pretty expensive. It's like 45 bucks a can, so you need to get the best out of it because that's kind of expensive for 1 can of primer. But this stuff is weld through, and this is a lot. It's not necessarily more rare, but not as many people will use this kind of stuff. And it's also a lot better technology put into making one of these cans than just a normal can of primer. This stuff can withstand you welding through. The other primer can only withstand 200 degrees, which a welder goes way over 200 degrees. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish, or not finish, but prime this area. We're gonna screw this plate in, get it all mocked up, ready to go. And then we're gonna tighten down these bolts, and then later on, we're gonna finish welding the bolts. Just weld the bolts to the nuts and the nuts to the frame, so that way they're all tight and they're not gonna wobble, move around. We're never gonna have to pull these things back off, so there's no point of just putting a nut and washer on it because we don't need to take this stuff off. And I don't want to take any chances with this thing coming loose because this is your rear suspension. I don't want it falling when someone's driving it. So we're just gonna weld everything shut, and this thing's pretty much ready to get primed, so I'm gonna go ahead and get it primed in. Alrighty guys, so it was a bit of work. We did have these things backwards the first time, so we just kept going with it till we realized this middle piece here, if you want to come in, this middle piece here is, it's supposed to line up with your axle, and it wasn't lining up. This piece here was all the way up here. And I was looking and I was like, man, I think they sent us the wrong ones. But we kept going. I was like, let's flip it around, and if it's still not the right ones, we'll have to send them back. We flipped it around, lined it up real quick, heated up this piece here, because these leaf springs here are a bit fatter than our stock ones. So, and that's just how it works with OEM versus aftermarket. They're always a little bit off. So these ones are a little bit fatter, and I did have to widen this piece out a bit, but it's fine because this will, as soon as I bolt it, it'll squeeze together and it'll keep it shut. Maybe in the fast forward you saw me cutting off the bushings. That's because these pieces, the bushings, were way too big for these brackets, so I had to cut them off. But I'm gonna use the old bushings and just slice off little thin pieces, so that way it's not metal against metal. And these pieces here are still they're still as good as new, so I'm gonna cut little thin pieces off and use them kind of like washers, and I'm gonna put them in between, and it'll be perfectly fine like that. And then, as of right now, it's still not lined up 100% back here. It's not welded in. It's not even tightened down all the way yet. I want it to have some wiggle room to play with, so that way we're not stuck. We're not stuck messing around with our brackets after I put the leaf spring on. So the leaf springs are on now. It's lining up here perfectly, and it's lining up front perfectly too. In the fast forward, you probably saw me heating this up. That's because it was too tight, and I went to widen it up just a bit. So I widened it up, and now it fits perfectly in there. And we're gonna go ahead and keep working on this side, get these all tightened down, all this tightened down. Everything's gonna come up real quick, get tightened down, and then that'll be it for this side. We're gonna go ahead and get onto that side and take all that stuff off too. So let's go ahead, put the U-bolts on, put the nuts on this, on the back of these brackets, the nuts here, tighten all this stuff down, and then we're done with this side. This leaf spring's done. The first one's always the hardest one because you don't know exactly what you're doing. So this one I learned a bunch of just this one here alone. Once we were lifting the axle, moved a little bit and it was out of balance, so I stood like right on the rear differential, and that lowered both of them out and leveled it out. And then the leaf spring has like a little, like almost like a little nipple that slides into the bottom of your axle. And as soon as I did it, I heard pop and it slid right in, so that's perfect. And now let's go ahead and finish this side, and we're gonna be done with this side. So let's get right to tightening all the bolts down. welcome back. It is a couple days later. We're gonna go ahead and mount these, but they don't want to fit on. These leaf springs here are a bit wider than what the stock leaf spring, like the axle bracket or whatever you want to call this plate here. Whenever you put it on, if you put it on that way, it works. But then the U-bolts are too big. But this is the way they're supposed to go, and as you can tell here, in here, your leaf spring can't be going through a half a circle. So I'm gonna be making my own brackets, just a bit bigger, and where the holes will be spaced out just a little bit further, so that way we can go ahead and get it all, this whole side locked in. Everything else is good, and then this side here, we're just gonna go ahead and take this bracket off here. We're gonna pull this leaf spring off now, and I'll have to make 2 brackets because both sides will be too small. So we're gonna go ahead and take this entire bracket, or this entire leaf spring and the bracket off, and get the leaf spring out of here and get the new one all set up. So let's get to work. Alrighty guys, it is a couple days later here, or the next day. I don't even remember when we've been working on this, because we've been working on it quite a while. We really only have a couple hours every afternoon because we go to school and work and stuff. So here I did make some leaf spring brackets because the ones I bought did not work. So I made my own here, and they're holding up pretty good. So I mean, I got some free leaf spring brackets. So this side took us probably altogether about 4 hours with doing everything. We had to widen these out, too. These brackets here, we had to widen these out because they come with the wider, what are these things called on the inside? I forget what they're called, or the bushings, that's what they are. They come with wider bushings, so I had to modify this thing a little bit, make it a little bit wider so that way the bushings will fit in there. And then same thing with this bracket at the bottom. It was too tight, so I heated it up and hit it with the hammer a little bit so I widened it up so I could stick the leaf spring in there. And then on this side we did the exact same thing, but this side took way faster. It took us probably an hour to 2 hours at max to do this whole side. That seems like a long time, but for not knowing exactly how to do it, and this is my first time changing leaf spring brackets, or the whole thing really, from the brackets to the leaf springs themselves, this is my first time doing it, so it was a really good experience. I learned a whole bunch on this entire journey, if that's what you'd call it, of rebuilding this truck. So this entire piece is redone, that entire one's redone, so now this is good to go. It should pass inspection now because it failed before, because these back spring pieces here, they're all cracked from the whole thing, and they told me that if I keep driving, if I hit a big bump, they could shoot through my bed. So as you already saw, the bed already has enough holes, it doesn't need any extra ones from the leaf springs. So I went ahead and fixed all these. I'm so glad we finally got these things installed. I was looking everywhere for these. LMC didn't have these, eBay didn't have these, and then after a while of looking, I kind of just was like, whatever, I'll look for these later, I'll go ahead and work on the bed. So I finally got these from O'Reilly's, finally got them installed, they're good to go, they're all working. Yeah, but it's the rear suspension, so I don't know, I'm just so glad we finally got these things in. The next step is painting the frame, but before that we're going to weld these pieces in. And as you can see here, if you're wondering what this color is, it's the weld through primer. I put that on so that way whenever we weld these bolts on the back, we're going to weld the bolt to the frame, so that way it's super strong, they're never going to come off, because these things will never have to be changed again. So we just want to secure everything as strong as possible. So we're going to weld both of those sides in, and then really next video will be welding those pieces in, painting the frame, and pretty much, and also changing the shock absorbers. I do have new shock absorbers. This video is just going longer and longer, so we're trying to hurry up and shut this thing down. A bunch of talking in this video, and it was just a bunch of explaining to say like what's going on and explaining what's happening. So I'm gonna change these out here. We're gonna paint the entire thing. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep sharing these videos. I love doing this kind of work, so if we can keep building this YouTube channel, that would be amazing. And thank you guys so much for everything.